But welcome everyone to a very special webinar today on digital learning transformation for field operations, the 2021 trends and why they're important to you. We will be accepting questions through the GoToWebinar portal, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. So this is being recorded, so we should make it available afterwards. I want to introduce a very special guest, Brent Kadzierski, head at Shell Learning Strategy and Innovation. Brent is the owner of Shell's learning strategy, methods, tools, innovation funnel, and thought capital, and he drives Shell's aspiration to be a world-leading learning organization. So over the last 20 years, Brent has led many of the key initiatives positioning Shell as a recognized leader in human resource management. His core expertise is in building strategic capability and tackling complex organizational challenges. On a personal level, Brent is a courageous leader known for pushing the envelope by implementing transformational strategies and doing it where it matters most. Prior to his Shell career, Brent led an impressive portfolio of capability building projects in other high-risk industries, such as aviation, nuclear, criminal justice, and healthcare. So we're really excited to have you here, Brent. And on the Voovio side, we have Pat Hardy, Senior Director. He has been in the industry, in software and industry for over 30 years. He's an expert in digital tools and procedure solutions for manufacturing. And then myself, Christian McDermott, I am the North American coordinator for Voovio. My skill base lies in knowledge automation, simulation, and enhanced reality tools. So let's take a quick look at what we're covering today. Brent is going to start off with an excellent presentation called The Future of Human, where we will learn about the evolution of the work environment, why it matters, and its sustainability. Brent will cover the trends driving new thinking and action, and he'll also take a look beyond 4.0 to 5.0. I'll then focus on a discussion on the plant environment. So we will look at the plant priorities, needs, challenges, and solutions. And we're going to show you how you can transform your learning and development in field operations, particularly the process of knowledge automation related to people's site-specific expertise. So we're going to be talking for about 35 minutes. You will see a demo as well, and then we'll take questions. So I'm going to pass it now over to Brent, who is going to take control here. And go for it, Brent.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, Pat. Thanks both of you for setting this up. I really appreciate it. And I thank everybody for joining today. You can see my white background in my house here. My wife just finished painting this room, and she's remodeling during the COVID experience. So every wall is either got something leaned up against it or it's being painted. But what I wanted to do is tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, the future of what I call human. And there's a bird that we could put on this slide, the crane. And that's what I think the future of human is. It's the crane stands for happiness and prosperity. And I think that's the thing I want to mention about what we've got here in terms of our opportunities to go on. Okay. And now I'm going to do is just move to the next slide. Okay. That last slide I just showed you was a typical Shell slide of any presentation. Shell is very gracious that they encourage us to go out into the market, work with our colleagues like Chevron and Exxon and BP, and share some of the things that we're doing in terms of trying to improve safety in our industry. And this is that cautionary note that basically says the lawyers like it because it's telling you all, I'm not saying anything here that's again, it's going to change the price of oil, or I'm not giving away any trade secrets or anything like that. You shouldn't go out and buy shelf stock or sell shelf stock based on this presentation. It's just something that I share, and we like to share just because we want a better, safer industry. And I see there's a bit of a delay on these slides, so apologize while I get used to the speed. This is the presentation on one slide. So I've got 20 minutes. I'm going to tell you about the front end of the story in about 5 slides and the back end of the story in about 5 slides. So there's about 10 slides that I'll really hit upon. The first point I want to make to everybody is everybody on this call has experience with bad work, bad tools, and bad managers. So we all know that. The other thing is disasters in industries and high-risk industries like ours drove physical and environmental reform. And that was not only in the 1700s, and there were unions and things in the 1700s and reform movements in the 1800s and in the 1900s. But what we're seeing now in the 21st century is we want to make sure that physical and environmental safety and confidence is a given today. And what we really need to move forward to in the next level is this psychological and social safety. So psychosocial safety, where people feel good in terms of themselves and in terms of the communities in which they operate and work. The other thing is, we're not only in industry 4.0 and we're moving to 5.0, but we're in this thing called the conceptual age. You've heard about a lot of things about high touch, high concept, and I'll talk more about that later. But the big thing about the conceptual age is everything's adaptive and everything's personalized. So I want you to take that away from this talk. And again, what I reinforce is we're still struggling with industry 4.0, industry 5.0 is on the horizon, and that's the marriage of man, person, woman, and machine. And the last thing is when we talk about the person and the personalization of things in work, it's always about the granular level of the task that somebody does at your site, your asset, your organization. And it's about the effort and the performance and the reward that they intrinsically value. So we'll talk more about that in other slides. I'm a guy from Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I grew up in bad work environments. I worked in a lot of mills going through high school, and even before I got my first professional grade job in a white collar setting. But when we talk about work environments, there's research out there today. We got 40 years of research collecting health data from organizations. And the Mayo Clinic says that who you report to at work is actually more important to your health than your family doctor. So that's a pretty significant statement, something that takes me a lot of steps back when I think about those things. 2 pictures here. These are my pictures. But the point is, you all have a story. I bet you've got grandparents and parents about how they worked, the jobs they had, struggles they faced, what they did. I will tell you, and I'm just going to turn the camera off now so we get better bandwidth. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the slides. These are 2 of my family pictures. The first one with the gentleman circled is my great-grandfather who worked at Allegheny Steel. The second one is my grandmother. They were both industrial age workers. And the thing that I want to make a point in this slide is throughout history, we have had social photographers, social artists that have documented the plight of the industrial worker. One such gentleman was a guy by the name of Louis Hein, and he basically did social reform in industry through social photography. And he spent 10 years documenting child labor. He spent 10 years documenting industry and the tenements in New York City. A wonderful, wonderful guy to root through in YouTube and just look at some of the things he's done. He's famous for many, many striking photographs that captured the age in the industry. In 1907, he went to Pittsburgh, and he was commissioned to do a study on industry And it was all about, what was the state of industry? Because no one ever had looked into industry before. They wanted to know what the people made, what their workday was like, how did they survive, what did it cost them to live, all these types of things. And he captured that. And basically, at the end of the whole research, he basically said Pittsburgh was hell with the lid off. And it was the working conditions were that bad. That year that he was there in Pittsburgh looking at the Allegheny Steel Mill, there were 526 deaths that year at those mills and 500 crippling injuries. So, but what came out of that was the 10-hour day and the first instances of workers' compensation. The next slide I want to talk to you about is one that I could go on and probably do an hour or so on this slide. It's the Triangle Fire of 1911. Let me just see if I have trouble with the. Okay, so this picture, this was the Triangle Factory in New York in the Garment District. And there's a lot to this slide for people that are interested in industrial safety and the start of industrial safety movement. It was a sunny day, Saturday, March 25th, 1911. And out of this tragedy came so much political reform that there were 36 separate laws and statutes in New York City that came out of it. And it actually started the American Society for Safety Engineers, which is still in existence today. And that was the first safety society for protecting workers in industry. So I can go on a lot about this, but I would suggest you really look into this. 146 people died. The majority were immigrant women, young women. I put the picture on the right there because they were starting in that shop. They were as young as 8 years old working in that shop, to the average age was about 16 to 17. They made about $15 a week. They had to pay for any needles they broke or material they bled on because they got cut on the sewing machines, and they moved from pedal machines that could produce 36 stitches a minute to electric machines that did 300. They never trained the people, and there were tons of injuries just from using the newer equipment. So it was basically one of the first sweatshops out of that. It's known because so many people, a majority of these young ladies all jumped out of the building, and it was on the 9th and 10th and 8th floor of the building. There was a tragic after-action review if you'd ever do one. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The owners actually would lock the doors so the women couldn't take bathroom breaks, they couldn't get drinks of water, they couldn't take a smoke break. They didn't want them to steal things. So the owners would actually lock the door. And one of the things they found and they had to go to court for was the locking of doors. So there's a lot into this, but I'd again encourage you, if you're interested in down to the history of safety reform and what caused it, this Triangle Fire is an interesting story. I actually myself in my library, I've got about 7 books just on this Triangle Fire. As a result of the Triangle Fire, 23 families later sued the owners, and the settlement was $75 a family. So again, interesting bits. Another thing that I'll tell you here is a quote by Alfred E. Perlman, and I study this guy. He was the CEO engineering of the New York Central and the Penn Central Railroad. And this was the great train wreck of 1918, where over 100 people had died. It was a head-on collision due to poor procedures. They didn't follow their procedures or operating practices. The trains hit head-on. So many people died because the passenger cars were made out of wood. Well, this incident made passenger cars then after made of steel. But again, what Alfred Perlman said, and he was in these kind of incidents all his career, he basically said learning is what people are going to do in the 21st century. So that was pretty prolific. The next thing is the sustainability. How do we sustain this 21st century workforce with all these generations, the millennials and the all the other folks? I talked about Louis Hein before. This is one of his famous pictures of the Breaker Boys. And then there's lots of pictures also with young girls, because there were industries set up for just girls to work in that were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age. If you ever want to look up Breaker Boys on YouTube, you'll see a lot of interesting stories. But again, this was another condition that operated in safety reforming, training reform. So we all know that the professions that we work in, as far as oil and gas, are hazardous, and that's nothing new. But people like Winslow Homer, who was in the 19th century, would do etchings of the workforces and the struggles that they faced. So the Breaker Boys, really interesting story if you ever want to get into that, and how they had to work. The day that Louis Hein took this picture, he was there spending the day in the Breaker Boy area. 2 Breaker Boys actually died. They were crushed by cars filled with coal. So a lot of these reforms basically lead us to today. So I've taken you from the past to the present. And this is what I really want to get through to the folks here on the call, is when you go to work, when your colleagues go to work, they entrust their physical and their psychological safety to those organizations. And they've done research, and there's a recent book called by a Stanford professor called Dying for Paycheck. And basically this research over these last 40 years showed that all these things, long work hours, economic insecurity, always being on 24/7, that's driving work stress, which drives these unhealthy behaviors, which drives workforce health. 86% of our issues today in the healthcare system are actually related to job stress. So what that tells us, and actually job stress or unhealthy working conditions are the 5th leading cause of death in the US today. What I'd also say about that is Industry 5.0 really operates and offers a really great opportunity to improve this. You know, there are so many things that we can do. For example, what if we had metrics in our organizations about scorecards on workplace health, you know, the physical and psychological health status of our workforce. And the other thing I want to say is things like neuroscience and things like that are going to help us from the learning perspective as we work through this. So that's a big piece that I really want to get through, because I'll talk about strategy later. And this is one of the fundamental thinking of this. So when we go to this concept, high concept, high touch, to the sustainable worker, there's trends that have driven that. I'm not going to go to, you'll get these slides. Christian will send these slides out to you. But if you flow and you follow this, organization structures are shifting. They're going from silos or hierarchies to more matrix things. That means people across boundaries have to work better together. Also, automation's driving these things called super jobs and power skills. Those super jobs and power skills require upskilling and reskilling. Now, that means that people are going to have to learn and unlearn and relearn in faster cycles. So they can't hold on to old mental models like they used to. Now, in doing all this and providing additional learning, faster learning, more learning to people, we have to give people what's called a more holistic learning experience. That means being able to give them experiences that are providing more feedback, more collaboration, more social interaction, all those things to solve more complex organization problems. So that's one of the things that I want to get through to you. So that's why another thing that's driving my thought leadership for Shell and where we've got to take the organization. So this conceptual age, and I pulled these pictures from the internet from an article called 15 Amazing New Gadgets That Prove We're All Living in the Future. And so the idea of abundance that's going on in offshoring and automation, That's driving this conceptual age. And I can really do an hour on this slide. But what I'll show you is if you look at the gadgets that were available for Christmas this year, everything was personalized. There's a toothbrush there, it's personalized to you. There's a mirror, you look into it, it's personalized for you, tracks your health. You've got these new masks now for COVID. Well, they're just not a mask, but they're customized to do all kind of stuff and have data input and sensors. So we are personalizing all of our solutions. I went to go buy a solar light for my walkway in my house. Well, it wasn't just a solar light. It did about 10 different things. So, I mean, this is what we're getting into because people want things personalized. They want something that's going to be able to work for them. Again, I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this area that this Shell worker, this person, by research standards, they're very impatient, they're very much overwhelmed, and they're very distracted. In the solutions, they want to be untethered, collaborative, all those kind of things. And so when we have these industry 4.0 capabilities, so cyber, physical connectivity, right? I can take a tag, a sensor, I can take all kind of data, I can marry it with technology, with wearables, all those things. But then they have conceptual age expectations. So one of the things I've seen in Shell is at some point we're really doing great with the technology, but we're not adding the human element to it. We're not humanizing it. So we're putting AR, VR, and other things out there that are really cool, but sometimes they don't get picked up and used. I always use the example of the iPad for digital procedures that wasn't getting used because we didn't put a strap on it and people didn't want to carry it in their hand. So we've got to think about the end user expectations, and these expectations are high touch, high concept. So they want one piece of equipment, one device that'll basically do everything. They don't want to have 5 different software platforms or things like that. So it's the human solutions that we want, not just the IT solutions. Busy slide, I won't spend a lot of time on it. What this is just showing you is in Shell, we look at the connected human performer on 3 dimensions. There's the external environment, which is cyber physically capable. So data exchange on assets, equipment, and the systems, all these things flying around, drones and tags and things. And then we've got the individual level of someone saying, well, where am I getting all this data? How is it coming to me? Is it easy? Is it motivating me? And then we've got the things that that individual is trying to do. And when I look at work, it's very simple to me. I look at things in Shell for learning and digital and all these things. Does it help me execute a task? Does it help me make a decision? Does it help me solve a problem? Does it help me escalate or document? And that's what I want to be able to do, and troubleshooting things are in there like that. So we're putting all these things in place, AR, VR solutions, procedural solutions. But the one I clicked on here in red is the one that I personally think is so cool, because I think it's not only smart, but it's our future. And it's called Shell Do It Yourself. And this is based on an app-based program where operators can actually see a problem they have in their everyday life, and they can build an app themselves with this software. And this thing's gone over like a fireball. I've already got a spreadsheet of, I think, like 100 and some apps that these operators have built. And then when these apps go viral, they go to a kind of a high-level publishing part of the company where they really make them professional. So, you know, this is what I say can make learning organizations almost obsolete. And then if we can get learning in the hands of the worker, where they're socially connected, where they can create their own solutions real time based on their problems, preferences, that's what we want to do. So again, and we also saw this, the first evolution with this was actually on content, where people, operators, experts were developing their own content and systems we provided them. They were curating that. I think in the future, people are going to be evaluated somewhat on their contribution. How many likes did the Doug Dolan's content get that he curated in the Shell system. You know, how many people actually use what he provides as lessons learned or learning from incidents and things like that. So this is the personal brand of the individual. This is what will distinguish and make people consistently credible and relevant in their organizations. So I'm really happy about that. So we're going to look at Industry 4.0, and I'm not going to go over that very long because you all should know about that by now. I'll talk a little bit about 5.0. And 5.0 is this reconciliation between person and machine. And it's on the horizon and it's coming. So I did a lot of talking the last couple of years on this slide. So these ages of mass movement through the mechanical era, or mass production through electricity in the assembly line, through mass information through the digital age of computers, and then now the smart production of mass connectivity. And all this stuff has been driven by technology, automation, and data exchange. But again, Industry 4.0 started in 2011. Now you can look, each industry, it gets shorter and shorter of the time in between those industries. Now, what you don't see on this slide is the word human. Industry 5.0 is about that cooperation between human intellect and these cognitive computing capabilities. It's about mass personalization. It's about mass customization. It's about the individualizing of solutions to people, that they can set their preferences, they can make it work for them, and they can adjust and automate it. So that's really what we want to say about this whole idea of its personalization. That's why I showed you the slide about the smart mirror and the smart toothbrush and all those types of things. So this is going to present, and I think we've got a lot of learning folks on this call, a major reform point for corporate learning. Okay, this is what we've got to rethink. So if a lot of people that know about learning in the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc., learning was often viewed as a managerial panacea for people problems. But what I don't want to have happen is, in the digital age that we've been in, is digital to be another panacea for any kind of workplace problem. So what we've got to do is be much smarter in saying, how do we go from these hierarchies, learning, digital, human factors, etc., process automation? How do we go more matrixed and say we need the totally integrated solution that takes upon us the thought of all elements of performance? And that's what I really want to get to in some of this stuff. This is the last slide that I'm going to talk about. And it's a slide that I really think, I stole this from one of my Shell slides, but you got an operator there doing the do-it-yourself, and that gives you his view of what he thinks of it. But we're in the era of personas. Everybody's trying to build personas. But what we need to tie it to is this whole idea of scalable solutions. Now, in 1964, there was this model, expectancy value theory. And I won't go into a theoretical model here, but it basically said, do I think my effort's going to be worth anything? Do I think the actual performance will I be successful, the intrinsic value? And what is it relative to me? All of these things are personalized to the individual. Okay? These things are, again, in our era of personalization. Now, I'm betting, and I just got off the phone before this call with my, I've got a consulting group that does neuroscience work with me. And I was going over this model with them. And I said, we've really got to revisit this model with the latest research from neuroscience, because we have learned more about the brain in the last 5 years than we learned about it in the last 500. So with that, I'm really going to close my part of the call. I'm going to turn it over to Christian. But I will tell you, the reason that Christian and Pat and I got together is, a while back, Shell was looking for a kind of a 5.0 learning solution that could humanize the automation part of what we did. And we put an RFP together, and Voovio won that RFP over a lot of other competitors. But we found that it could do some of those challenges that we were looking to resolve around more effective and safer operations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christian and let him tell you a little bit more about how he can relate my little talk to what he's going to talk about. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you, Brent. So learning and development, is really back on the map. In a recent study this month by McKinsey, nearly 9 out of 10 executives and managers said that their organization either faces a skills gap or already has one. There's a lot of companies out there who are now expecting their organizations to invest a lot more in learning and development over the next 5 years. The pandemic has really forced manufacturing to think about how it can be more flexible and resilient, with the demand, labor, and supply chain issues that we've had. The limits on labor mobility and access to workplaces has also accelerated the need for more collaborative, remote, and scalable technologies within the manufacturing environment. So the scale and speed at which you can deploy these, as Brent said, is key. And the cloud is really a big enabler of that. Here at Voovio, actually last year we saw almost all of our customers either are interested in moving our content to the cloud or already have. So let's look at some of the priorities at the plant level. And I just want to highlight the second one here, really, the knowledge automation piece. We see a common desire to capture knowledge from seasoned employees before they retire. People are really looking for ways to automate this process and make it available to their organization in a meaningful way. So we're going to share one of these ways to achieve this, which is really effective through digital replicas and simulators. But let's look at the challenges that we're facing here in the plant environment. This is based on industry data, and you'll see some more feedback from customers as well. Our industry has been very focused on and successful at improving equipment reliability, but the focus was rarely on the human piece in terms of solutions and initiatives. So you'll see that the second biggest contributing factor to downtime losses is something very much in our control. It's related to procedures, execution of procedures, and skills in the field. So here's a quick view on some of the challenges we regularly hear from the industry and from our own customers. Unplanned downtime, OEE losses, incidents, whether they're environmental or safety. That happens frequently across the industry. But a big recurring theme is the loss of knowledge and expertise in the plants, with experts leaving or retiring. And now many process units rely on only a few SMEs or subject matter experts who have that critical knowledge to properly execute many procedures and tasks. So there's a lot of experience walking out the door, and there's really no standard way to capture it. The ecosystem for knowledge capture and transfer and training is very people dependent. It is not system dependent. So, that's why this is a big opportunity for the industry. I just want to call your attention to the procedures listed here and how the knowledge of those procedures can affect, the bottom line and safety. You'll see some examples here where lack of knowledge of those procedures or procedure accuracy has led to failures, from injuries to significant financial impacts, and these have been collected from customers. So when you start digging into the data of equipment reliability, the opportunity for improving the human reliability piece is pretty big. So with that, I'm just going to switch to showing you how a cloud-based platform with digital replicas and simulators can actually solve some of these challenges. And we'll look at some charts afterwards before opening it up to questions. So hopefully you can see my screen. Pat, if you can hear me, let me know if you cannot.
Yes, I can see it.
So you're looking at a digital replica, and I'm accessing this, by the way, from my home office, working remotely using a laptop. So this is a utilities complex, and what I'm doing here is I'm walking through a series of images, photographs, which have been used to create a realistic, immersive representation of a process environment. So it is your real plant on the screen here, and you're able to walk around as if you were there. So you can stop, you can look around in any location. You have the same degrees of freedom as if you were there in real life. And if you were, if you're walking around, you can also tag pieces of equipment. So in this case, you can see components like valves, gauges, instruments, but you can also tag larger items like pumps, vessels, and so forth. Whenever you click on one of them, you get a detailed view of that component with the label, and you'll see with your finger on a touch screen or a computer mouse, you can interact with that piece of equipment. So in this case, it's a wheel valve, but there are other types of equipment, control panels, bleeds, plugs, other types of valves you can interact with to practice procedures. And we'll get into that in a second. But having this digital replica, which is always available 24/7, has some very powerful benefits here, including the ability for operators and maintenance technicians to search for items, to search for equipment, whether they're preparing to go into the field to find this valve, for example. You can click on it and it will take you straight to where that valve is located. Or you could use it as a collaborative training tool when you're not able to take people on site.
So another thing that you can add into the replica are what we call enhanced views. So this is where you have a piece of equipment like this one, an air ejector, and you'll see the color-coded icons at the bottom labeled. And if I click on them, you can activate the flows. So you can turn those on and off, and it's an unambiguous view of that system. Very powerful for onboarding and refresher. Another really popular area to do this is complex manifolds, where when we activate the flows here, you'll see that the valves are highlighted in green boxes, and you'll see my mouse in the bottom right of the screen here on the bottom valve. I can open it, and the flow corresponds to the position of that valve. So very effective in terms of the onboarding and refresher tool, and you can access this 24/7 anywhere. So what about the simulator? So this is where you can practice procedures in your real plant, and this is a really good way to automate that knowledge capture from your experts and put it into this checklist replica format that you see on the screen. So
on the screen, you have the replica on the right. You also have your map at the bottom, so you always know where you are. You have your procedure here on the left. So this would be a procedure from your plant. Voovio does not create this. Above that, we have an action checklist. The reason why there is this checklist in addition to the procedure is because in simulation, you're focusing on actions. And when you're in the field, you do one action at a time. So if your procedure says close all the drain valves, then, and there's 11 of them, we would have 11 items here in the checklist because you have to do them in a certain sequence, and you don't need, and you shouldn't forget one of them. So let me do the first couple of steps here. So you physically have to interact with the equipment, with the valves, and then you confirm, and you go to the next step. In any step, when you have a tool like this, a digital tool, you can embed that tribal knowledge. You can capture and embed that knowledge from your experts in specific steps. For example, here is a piece of text on why this valve is always left open, but it could be a video, it could be something else explaining how you do something. It could be a caution or a note or something related to a previous incident. But those knowledge snippets are incredibly powerful knowledge transfer tools. So this simulator I'm using as an example is a guided one. So the system actually walks you through the unit to the next step. So it's like a virtual SME. And we've had customers use this throughout the pandemic for training on tasks and procedures when they can't get into the field.
So what about testing? So within this environment, which I've just shown you, the replica, you can walk around freestyle and execute the step without any assistance, and you get real-time feedback on your performance. So what I'm going to do is do the first step correctly, and then the second step I'll make a mistake. So if you remember here, I have to close this valve. So once I've physically had to interact with the equipment, I close it, I confirm. You'll see that I get an immediate feedback. It's real time saying action completed correctly.
So you have that real time feedback. So what if you make a mistake? So if we go up here and I'm going to crack open this valve that we were here before, confirm, you'll see we get immediate real-time feedback, and it even logs which valve I interacted with, which was the wrong one. So the output of this type of solution is that you have a documented way of testing people in a standard way on entire procedures, or even just sections of procedures, with a record of everything that they've done in the test. So it's a great way to build that competency and then have a documented way of testing on it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of charts just before we open it up to questions. So this chart shows you, how you solve those challenges that we covered earlier, unplanned downtime, etc. This chart shows the competency of operators on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. So the lower curve, the blue one, reflects what we find in industry. So the traditional methods of training and onboarding, they go through job orientation, reading procedures, and there's a period of time of job shadowing. And with that, you often have overtime dedicated by the SME with some type of field demonstration at the end and a written test to complete qualification. With this type of simulation, you're able to find that operators can qualify in half the time, and the content they are learning is significantly greater. We hear that you can expose them to 10 times more knowledge and procedures than with traditional methods. The competency gains are more than double thanks to the 24/7 access, independent of the SME's availability. And then you can demonstrate their capability using that standardized test I showed you, and also a field test. And here, I just want to show you some of the data we've gathered. So this represents when we deliver a project, we capture the blue line at the bottom. So this is, after we've trained a customer on how to use Voovio, which takes, 1 to 2 hours, they take a test. Operators take a test on a procedure they've already qualified on, and you'll see the test results deviate from the low 50s to the hundreds. It's quite a broad range with an average score of less than 80. So when we then ask them, the same operators, to practice on the simulators and take another test, and you'll see that the scores deviate much less, and the average score is actually closer to 95. So the ability of those operators to practice their SOPs in a standardized way on their own 24/7 has huge benefits. I just want to finish off with this one. This is, this is a snapshot of some customer results. You'll see 4 of them, but I want to focus on the utilities unit at the bottom here. What they had been doing is putting SMEs with new hires, and then they work with them, train them in the field and out of the field in the classroom. They can cut that time in half with the digital replica and simulators. Operators can pick up complex equipment, procedures much more quickly, and the overtime and the SME time you reduce is significant. And that's a lot of money. The reduction of unplanned events as well is important. They found that they often have startup delays, and they have to bring in extra overtime. So they've seen, every time they see loss of steam, loss of electricity, that's about $35,000 to $50,000 an hour, a day. And Voovio, with the digital replica and the simulators, you can cut that to 0, those unnecessary delays. So the point here is these types of targeted solutions, they can be implemented in a matter of weeks. It's really effective. It's a really effective way to automate that knowledge capture and transfer in your plant to get that expertise from your SMEs to ensure it's not lost. And the industry really needs tools like this to remain competitive, especially in this challenging environment. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions, and I'm going to pass it to Pat Hardy, who's our Senior Director, who's going to control the questions for us. Pat?
Yeah, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Brent. Now, let's get to the audience questions, and please keep them coming in. Okay, here's the first question. This one is for Brent. Brent, what is the future of learning? You have to unmute yourself. Brent, you need to unmute yourself.
Thanks. Good question.
Okay, now we can.
I thought I did. Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yes, we can.
So the future is where it becomes ubiquitous and continual. We're learning. People are learning from people. Like I said, they're creating their own content, their own solutions, their own networks. And what learning departments are going to be doing is creating the ecosystem that enables a self-rising learning organization that's much more experiential, and it supports this whole citizen team development. So they serve themselves and they enable themselves. That's what I see.
Okay, and here's a follow-up question from the same person. What learning strategy for a corporation supports that future?
Well, at Shell, I'm promoting a 3-pronged strategy. It's based on human experience. So we want the work experience to kind of just be like our personal lives. I don't want to have to go to IT, finance, HR, technical area to get a solution. I don't want to have to knock on 5 doors. When I am connected, I want my learning system and my performance system and my knowledge management system to all be connected together. So I want that human experience that's seamless, just like on my iPhone 12 I just got. And the next thing is this whole person engagement. So once you create the experience, you engage the whole mind, all parts of the neuroscience aspect of the mind, where people are engaged in a significant emotional level and a significant intellectual level. And the last one is it's social connectivity. The world is so social now, and organizations, and I told you all before about, it's not just about social connectivity to help me do my job, but help me survive in my environment. So that's what we really need to do, is have social networks on multiple levels in an organization. We have to quit treating workers and learners in a pillar, but treat an environment, whole person.
Okay, thank you. Christian, I think augmented reality, that and Voovio?
Sorry, Pat. The connection was cutting out. Was that what's the difference between augmented reality?
That's
Well, okay. So yeah, the difference. So augmented reality, Voovio is not augmented reality. Voovio is actually really a form of virtual reality. So augmented reality implies that you're overlaying content, computer generated content or information in real time on it through the use of either some kind of glasses or a device using the camera, where you have the real view and then projected content onto that, which implies you are probably in the field trying to have over-the-shoulder assistance or access content when you're in the field doing stuff. But Voovio is really bringing the field to the screen, so you can access Voovio anywhere on your computer or tablet, as well as in the field. But it's two different, very different technologies, but complementary. I hope that answers the question.
okay. Next question. This one back to you, Christian. How long does it take to implement a Voovio project? Does it take much resources from the plant?
So typical photo shoots that we've done we typically do a handful of procedures. It could be 5 or 10 for any project. Some customers have done 20, 30 procedures, but typically it's about 3 to 5 days of time at the plant photo shooting with a subject matter expert. So that's the time that we ask from our customers. Once we've captured that knowledge and captured all the data, we go away, and it typically takes about 12 to 14 weeks to have everything I've just shown you, plus a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Can Voovio help with the isolation of energy sources, as example, preparing for a tar?
Yes, well, it can help with all types. Yes, complex lockout tagouts for preparing for maintenance work. Yep, we've done that, and absolutely, yes, you can.
So I think we've just run out of time here. We're coming to the end of the webinar. For those of you who still had questions, please feel free to contact either Brent or myself on the information you see below, in front of you. Thank you so much to Brent Kadzerski, Head Shell Learning Strategy and Innovation. We hope to see you again soon. Again, thank you to all of you who registered and attended, and we are always available to go deeper into any of the items you saw today or topics. Please visit our website, voovio.com, and feel free to give us a call for a more comprehensive demo at your plant. Thank you.